so Ben and I were chatting over dinner, and he said, it's okay. I mean, I've spoken in front of a group of 2. So this is better than 2. Well, and also we're going to be streaming this post the event, so that those that couldn't be with us tonight will have that opportunity. So, but for those of you in the room, thank you so much for being here. This is a wonderful opportunity to hear Ben's story and to maybe learn a little bit more ourselves. And I think that the subject is one that all of us are sensitive to. And when it comes to thinking about the other, at times I think maybe we're not sensitive enough. And so this gives us the opportunity to kind of awaken some of those thoughts and feelings in our heart. And I don't think there's probably anyone any better than Ben to be able to do that for you. So I was given some prepared thoughts, so I need to do this. There are a few housekeeping matters that I wanted to make you aware of. First, I think I want to extend a huge thank you to the staff and specifically to Reverend Dr. Mary Beth for the work that she's doing in terms of leading our social justice and mission ministries. Because they really have helped to make this possible. This is off script right now, but I want to thank Dave Warmbrough and his wife Barb. So Dave reached out to me yesterday and said, Mo, I'm not feeling so well. I think I've come down with the flu or something. Barb's something similar. And then I got a text later in the evening and said, it's COVID. So that's why Dave Warmbrough is not here. So I'm filling in for Dave. He was going to be doing this introduction, and he spent a long time after he was first introduced to Ben to get to know him and get to know his work. And so I know this pains him very much to not be able to be here. So I want to reach out to Dave with our thoughts and our prayers for him for a speedy recovery. Also, I want to put a shout out to Will Cole and Ethan Massey for the work that they've done for the communication side of this program tonight. You all wouldn't be sitting here if you were not aware of that. And so they've done a great job in making that happen. So you should know that this evening's event is really sponsored by the LGBTQ plus support group, a family support group that Dave and Barb started, gosh almighty, 5? It's not in my notes. I think it's maybe 5 years ago, maybe a little longer. And even though he was taken away from this work, for about a year, he's jumped back in with both feet to help lead the group going forward. If you're interested in the support group, the LGBTQ plus family support group, I think we're going to have some sign-ups in the lobby post this event, so I would encourage you to do that. I would ask, too, that you would kind of hold your questions to the end. Ben said, when did you want me to shut this down? He said, and I said, well, I mean, how much time do you need? And he said, you know what, it seems like when the subject kind of begins to seep into the conversation, it seems to go on for a long time. I said, well, maybe we'll keep it to 7:30, but if it goes longer than that, that's A-okay. So I don't think we're going to lock the doors here. But please hold your questions until Ben completes his presentation. And finally, Ben's book is here. Ooh. And so My Child is Trans and Now What? So that book is going to be on sale out in the lobby for
$26.95.
So if you didn't bring the right change or whatever, maybe we'll just round it
Please don't give me
up.
coins. I don't know what to do with coins.
It's $30. Just kidding. No. So we really are fortunate to have Ben here with us this evening. Ben is a public speaker that you'll soon catch on to in just a moment after I keep quiet. He's an LGBTQ plus consultant and openly a transgender man. He has dedicated his career to spreading empathy, awareness, and understanding about the transgender community. And he is active on the speaking circuit with audiences ranging from the UK's Diversity Live to NASA. Ben is a guest lecturer on diversity, equity, and inclusion at Cornell University, in addition to serving on the advisory board of Tufts University's master's degree in diversity, equity, and inclusion. He does reside here in the St. Louis area. So without any further ado, Ben Greene.
Amazing. Wow, thank you all so much for being here. This is really special for me. It's been a hard couple of days for anyone who's been listening or looking or being alive lately. But I've gotten to spend almost every night of the last 2 weeks with some group. P-Flag chapter in Northern California, a support group in upstate New York, churches, congregations. I have just been together, which is the best thing that we can be right now. So I'm so lucky to be here with you all. My name is Ben Greene. I use he, him pronouns. I am a transgender man. I am an advocate, a public speaker. I'm the advocacy chair of P-Flag Greater St. Louis. I'm the author of the book My Child is Trans, Now What? I'm also a huge nerd. I love Dungeons & Dragons, fantasy, video games, all that good stuff. I'm really excited for this conversation today. My plan for this evening is to do just kind of a lot of storytelling. I want to share with you all some of my own experiences in the advocacy space and my own personal journey as a transgender man. Just find some meaning and then give you all plenty of time to ask any and all questions you want. My catchphrase is the only question I won't answer is the question you don't ask. You can ask me absolutely anything. There is no trap, there is no catch. If you want to learn, I want to teach. So as you start to hear my story and think of your questions, I don't want you to hold back. I've been doing this for a decade. There is nothing you can ask that I have not been asked before. I have a story I like to tell to start off my presentations to emphasize that point and help you get to know me a little bit better as a human. When I was coming out, I was a teenager in small town Connecticut. I was 15, and this was a time and a place where transgender was not a word anybody was using. So nobody really knew what to do with me, and I had no idea how they were going to react. So I said, all right, I'm going to play it safe, and I'm going to come out over Facebook. So I made my Facebook post, and some of you can maybe already tell where this is going. I posted on Facebook. I said, hi, I'm transgender. Here's my new name. Let me know if you have questions. And in general, the response was fairly positive, but there was one very interesting reaction, which was a gentleman from my school who commented on my post 5 times in a row, saying, call me. And I was like, okay, I have to know what this is about. So I sent him a message. I said, hey, Charlie, what's going on? And he jumped right in. He said, I'm very confused. And I said, okay, I get it. This is very new and unfamiliar for a lot of people. Do you have maybe something you're confused about, or a question I can answer? Help me help you. And he said, I just don't understand. How is your hair so short? And I was like, wait, what? I get that there's a lot about this that's very unfamiliar. That's fine. I'm not going to judge you for that. Have you heard about haircuts? And he said, but it looks like a boy's hair. I said, well, yeah. I went down to the barber shop and I said, hello, one men's haircut, please. And then I gave them my money in exchange for goods and services, because that's how this whole thing works. And they gave me my men's haircut. And he said, well, I think that's weird. Be who you were born. And I said, in a roundabout sort of way, that's actually very supportive. Thank you. So ultimately we realized that he's trying to antagonize me, and I'm having way too much fun for that to work. And I'm trying to educate him. And he's too angry or scared or insecure for that to work, and so we ended our conversation and went our separate ways. And I tell that story to introduce basically every presentation I give for a variety of reasons. A, because I think it's hilarious, and it lets the audience know, okay, I made the right choice by coming here, this guy's going to be kind of funny. Or it lets them know, wow, this guy's a lot, I should probably sneak out to my car. Whatever the option is, I won't be offended. So it gives people a sense of my approach. It lets people know that I really am not going to judge them for asking questions. And I think it highlights the way I choose to live my life, right? If you look at that story from a different angle, if you play a sad violin soundtrack under the story, that story's component parts is the most vulnerable night of my life when I chose to come out to all of my peers, and somebody at my school on that terrifying moment took it upon himself to be cruel to me, to attempt to make me upset, to make me feel bad for who I was, right? That was just cyberbullying. That's all that was. You probably weren't thinking about that as I was telling that story, right? You were smiling and laughing and having a good time. And my approach to my life is very much saying that, listen, I'm in the director's chair. I get to decide where I want to point the camera. I get to decide what impact I want a story or a conversation to have on my life. And wherever possible, I am always looking for joy. I am looking for a reason to smile and laugh at the absolute absurdity of a situation and a way to make that into something that other people can laugh at too. So I'm going to talk a little bit more about my joyful approach later on in this conversation, but I just really like to highlight that I am a very positive person. That doesn't mean that I say everything about being transgender is sunshine and rainbows. I'm transgender and I live in Missouri. I know that things are not all sunshine and rainbows, I promise. There is no sand left in which to bury my head. But I am still looking for those reasons to be positive. Joy is a choice that I make every day. So we'll come back to my present day attitudes and stories in a little bit. First, I want to go way back in time and talk about the early days of my journey. People love to ask me, Ben, how did you know that you were transgender? When did you know? What did that feel like? And truthfully, I'll never know the answer to that question. For most of the beginning of my life, I was just a weird girl. I was just kind of unsettling to be around. I would say a lot of strange things, and it wasn't that I always knew I wanted to be a boy. I was not a particularly masculine girl. I just knew that something was not quite right. I would get invited to a princess dress-up party, and it wasn't that I wanted to come dressed as a prince. I would come dressed as Stitch, the blue space alien with 6 arms and laser guns. That was kind of the way that I was showing up differently. It was not just, Mom, I want to be a boy. That was not really the conversation I was having. So I felt strange, and I knew that I wasn't fitting in very well with the other kids, but I didn't have the words for what kind of strange I was. And I just said, I guess I'm just bad at being a person. I used to tell people I knew I was trans or knew something was really wrong once puberty started, but that's also not all the way true. Things started to feel wrong when puberty started. I hated the way my body was changing, and I would stand in front of the mirror for hours at a time and just feel like I was falling out of my body. I had literally no recognition for the person that I was looking at. I now know the word for that is dissociation. I was completely leaving the body that I was in whenever I would stand for literally 2 to 3 hours, home alone, just crying, looking in the mirror, wondering, who on earth is this person? I don't recognize this person at all. And I attempted to talk to adults about it, but all I knew how to describe was, I don't feel right, I don't like the way my body is changing, and everybody would just say, oh yeah, puberty's awful. We all hated puberty, right? We called middle school puberty jail. I assumed that everybody was miserable, that nobody wanted their bodies to be changing in this way. And sure, not everybody is thrilled about armpit hair. I'm sure some people were, but generally we were displeased. But people weren't miserable the way that I was, but I didn't have the words to describe what I was feeling. So I used to say that was when I knew something was wrong, something was different. But recently my parents sold the house that I grew up in, and so they asked my sisters and I to come home and go through all our old papers and clean out our rooms, and I found a letter I had written to myself in 3rd grade as an assignment. I was 8 years old, and it was to be given to ourselves at our high school graduation. This letter, written 5 years before what I describe as my onset of gender dysphoria, what I thought was the beginning of my transness, this letter, in the opening paragraph, said, let's get one thing straight. You will never like pink, You will never wear a dress. You will never be a girl. And it breaks my heart to think about that letter, to read that, not just because I knew that that kid was struggling and didn't have the words to talk about it, but because I had to give that letter to so many different adults who saw that, who read the whole thing, right? I gave it to my parents, who gave it to my third grade teacher, who gave it to my health teacher, who gave it to my middle school health teacher, who gave it to my high school health teacher. And this was a lot of people who could have said, did you know there's another way? Did you know there are resources if this is something that you're struggling with? Now, I don't fault those adults. I don't think they knew to ask, is something going on here? But it makes me sad to wonder what my life would have been like if I had had access to words like dysphoria and transgender, if I had known that was an option. It wouldn't have made me trans. It would have given me language to talk about the ways that I thought I was simply broken irreparably. Now, even once puberty started and things started to feel weird, I still didn't have those words. I just thought everybody hates puberty. The other girls were increasingly recognizing that I did not fit in with them, and I was fairly ostracized, didn't have a huge social network. And I came out as bisexual after realizing that I had crushes on both girls and boys in my school. And so I came out to one of the other queer students in my high school. And I said, hey, I'm bisexual. And he said, that's really cool. Thank you for telling me. If you want some resources, there's a Facebook group I can add you to. As it turns out, because all the towns in Connecticut are all tiny, they're not really cities in Connecticut, it's just an entire, 3 suburbs in a trench coat of a state. So all of our towns were individually too small to have a particularly active LGBTQ community or student group, and so we found each other. Across the state, there was an underground Facebook network for over 450 LGBTQ youth. There were no adults involved. Frankly, it's a miracle it was not a disaster. But it was, in fact, the group that saved my life. I got added to this group and immediately was met with love. There was a significant vetting process to make sure that we were all actually high schoolers and there to get support for our identities. And once we joined, we talked about how to get inclusive policies in our schools, how to come out to our parents. And one night somebody posted, hey, I've realized that I'm transgender and here's what that means. And I sat in my bedroom reading that post, weeping. The recognition that I immediately felt upon reading those words. Learning the word transgender did not make me trans. It allowed me to be transgender in a way that nobody else had ever given me permission for. I knew immediately that was something I was supposed to be doing, a journey I was supposed to go on. So I started to figure out my identity largely through this group and connecting with other peers who were also learning about their own identities at the time, and eventually got up the courage to come out to people around me. This took about 8 months and was, without question, the worst 8 months of my life. Those 8 months where only 3 people knew me and saw me as I was were incredibly isolating. And we're not going to go too in-depth into them because I've got some other stories I want to share, though I'm happy to talk about it during the Q&A if you'd like to. But the short version is, it was hard, it was lonely, I knew who I was, and nobody else was in on the secret. So when I finally came out, it was really interesting, because all of a sudden, people wanted to talk to me. They wanted to know, what's this guy got going on over here? They had a lot of questions. 2015, I think of as, truthfully, the perfect time to come out as transgender, because it was right after we'd gotten marriage equality. It was after the peak of the high schoolers saying that's so gay and that being a cool, funny thing to say. People weren't really doing that anymore. But it was before people knew that transgender was something that they were supposed to be angry about. I know a lot of people who I think regret a little bit how firmly they supported me, but know they can't really undo that because we already have such a nice relationship. Because nobody had really been that radicalized at the time. They were just like, I don't really know what's going on here. I guess this is fine. They didn't know they were supposed to be mad. So people had questions. Overnight, I went from being invisible to being a walking dictionary. Everywhere I went, people wanted to know, hey, what does this word mean? Hey, how do we write this policy? I was all of a sudden the most popular guy in school, which was very interesting and was very sex segregated. The girls in my school always talking to me, always wanted to be my friend. It was very fun. The guys in my school wanted nothing to do with me. allyship is much harder for men to be a part of than it is for women. This is a theme I've seen repeated time and time again on my college campus, in workplaces that I've been to. It feels more, I don't know, insecurity creating for certain guys, especially high school guys, to say, okay, we'll accept you, that's cool, we'll be inclusive. They were not really interested in that. I was not welcome in the bathroom, I was not welcome on the sports teams, but the girls really wanted to talk to me, as did the administrators and the staff. They weren't really equipped, they didn't know what to do. So as I realized I needed certain support systems, usually once it was already too late, I would reach out to my admin. I would say, hey, we don't have any LGBTQ inclusive content in our health classes. And they would say, oh my God, Ben, great catch, you're right. Do you want to teach the health classes? And I would say, sure. And I would say, hey, we don't have any policies around prom or graduation. What's our policy there? And they said, oh my God, Ben, great catch. What is the best policy? Do you want to just write that up and email it to us? And I said, hey, our guidance staff is not equipped to support trans youth in crisis. And they said, oh my God, you're right. Do you want to do a training for the guidance staff? Our student group had become inactive, and so I became the president of the student group, and most importantly, I became what my parents like to call the Pied Piper of queer kids for my entire town. Nobody came out in Weston without talking to me about it first. Out of the woodwork, people I had barely known or had known for years started messaging me in the middle of the night or finding me in the hallway and saying, hey Ben, you're transgender. How did that go for you coming out? Was that okay? Were your parents okay? Are you safe? I have that teacher for homeroom next year. Do you think she's going to use my pronouns? Have you done enough? Are they ready for me? And so even in the moments where I was really tired of answering these questions, of taking on these many adult responsibilities, I was 15. I was filling the shoes of every adult who failed to show up for me. And even in the moments where I said, I wish I could put this down, I want to just be a kid, I knew that there were so many kids who were waiting to see if I had done enough that it would be safe for them. And so I said, I might be tired, I might wish I didn't have further to walk, but for you all, I will continue every day to wake up and put this weight on my shoulders and have these conversations and answer the same questions and be patient with the same people who are yelling at me or frustrated at me, and I will do it so you don't have to. So I grew up like that. The day I came out was the day I became an adult. People think I am a lot older than I am because I have spent a very long time as an adult learning what it meant to be perfectly patient, extremely well-spoken, very knowledgeable about these topics. And I'm fortunate. I have turned these experiences into my superpower, into something that I use to travel around the world, talking to people about what it means to be inclusive allies. But I do my work for that little version of myself. I jumped out of a plane with a tarp and a sewing kit. As a transgender adult, now I get to be the parachute factory. I get to work with families and schools and companies and hospitals and religious organizations and people who want to learn how to make the world a little bit better, a little bit safer, to build inclusive structures and cultures, truly inclusive, so the people who come after me, especially the kids, get to come in as they are and be loved and supported and seen by default. That's why I do what I do. For all those kids who came after me, for that little version of myself who wanted to just be a kid. I do this work so no trans kid should ever have to be called brave again. That is absolutely critical for me. So that moves us through a lot of my early days and kind of how I knew I was transgender. But I want to flash forward now to the work that I'm up to, and in particular some of my advocacy work now that I've moved here to St. Louis. I wrote this book called My Child is Trans, Now What? A Joy-Centered Approach to Support. And the second line there is what I want to spend a minute talking about. We all know by now that I have spent a lot of time doing advocacy and speaking and all that jazz. I've said that a couple of times. But the joy thing, I want to lean into that a little bit more. Why is it so important to me to be talking about joy at all times? As a part of my job, I spend a lot of time convincing people to care. Whether I am testifying in Jeff City, convincing my legislators to care about the impacts of their words, I am at a parent support group convincing parents to care about the impact of their support on their kids, convincing company leaders to care about their LGBTQ plus employees, coworkers, and family members. I'm always convincing people to care. And so I'm also side by side often with others who have the same mission. And I became pretty frustrated when I realized that so often our conversations around why it matters to support trans kids begin and end at suicide statistics. Anxiety, depression, mental health, over 600 anti-trans bills. We've got a crystal clear portrait of what we're running away from, of what we are afraid of what we're angry about, of what we're trying to avoid. But fear can only take us so far. Particularly when we then have fears like the fear of regret. That is a big boogeyman when it comes to transgender people. But regret is something that we all have a fairly comfortable relationship with. I think a lot about medical school because my wife is a medical student and I'm obsessed with her. And when somebody we love says, I want to go to medical school, we say, wow, that's amazing. You're going to be an incredible physician. We don't start those conversations by saying, you know, that's really expensive, right? We don't start those conversations by saying, that's really hard. Are you sure you want to do that? We don't bring up that only 53% of physicians said they would choose to become physicians again, as of a survey last year. We're okay with those risks because we understand what we stand to gain. We take risks constantly when we know that it's worth something. Plenty of people don't use their college majors. I majored in computer science. Not a whole lot of coding in here, but I don't regret going to college for a minute because of the person I became, the connections I made, the lessons I learned, even if it wasn't what I thought I would gain. I went to college to major in elementary education, which I do have now the skills to deal with all the tantrums all the time, very helpful skills there. But I didn't gain what I thought, but it was still something immeasurable and critical to my life. Tons and tons of first marriages end in divorce, and yet we encourage our loved ones to get married all the time because they might gain a beautiful, meaningful partnership. People get in car accidents all the time, and yet we still drive because there might be community or Trader Joe's or whatever cool thing we're going to. We take risks constantly when we understand what we stand to gain. So when we talk about detransition and fears that our loved ones are going to regret their transition, of course that fear is overwhelming. The only thing we've been doing is running away. Running away from I don't want my kid to be depressed. I don't want my loved one to be suicidal. I don't want them to be miserable. I agree, I don't want my loved one to be those things, but I talk about joy as a way to not just say, what am I running away from, but where am I going? What do I stand to gain? What am I trying to build with my loved one right now? Keeping joy at the center of the work that I do is constantly asking, what do I want from this life? What do I want to build? What's the legacy I want to leave behind when I am involved politically? My political advocacy motivations are never, I don't want any more of that. I don't want that person. I am afraid of this thing. Yes, I don't want any more of that. I don't want any more of that person. I don't want more of that thing. I don't want to be afraid, but that's not why I get involved. I get involved because I want to build a world that is safe. I want to build a world that is kind. I refuse to let the people who want to erase me shape my dreams. My dreams aren't just limited to the imagination of the opposite of whatever he said. I have my own dreams, and I am moving steadfastly towards them, and they are grounded in joy. Choosing joy is what gets me out of bed every day in the morning and what keeps me showing up time and time again to the Capitol, to support group meetings, to tedious conversations with other advocates about whether to have an event on a Thursday or a Saturday to make sure it will be accessible to the biggest group of people. I show up because I know what I'm building. So as we are thinking about supporting our LGBTQ+ and specifically transgender loved ones, I want us to make sure that we are not just sitting in fear all the time. What am I afraid of? What do I not want? What am I losing? What am I grieving in this relationship? But also, what is there to be found? What is new? What is beautiful here, right? When I came out, my parents had this thing that a lot of parents say, which is, I lost a daughter, but I gained a son. And I was very confused by that. You know, I was a kid, I was not fully emotionally developed, and I didn't get it because I felt like I had known who I was this whole time. It was the same soul, the same spirit, the same heart, with the same interests and passions. And my parents were telling me they didn't know who I was, that it felt like I killed someone, that they had to grieve. I was so confused. I was alive. I was standing right there, waiting for someone to tell me, I see you, I love you. And they told me I had hurt them, that they were grieving, that they had lost something, and that was where they were stuck for quite some time. I'm really fortunate that we did move out of that phase, and I am so lucky that so much of my family is so steadfastly behind me now. But recognizing that our relationships with our loved ones, they might look a little different. They might go through name or pronoun or appearance or medical or legal changes, but at the end of the day, that person that you know and that you love is still very much alive. They're just more comfortable. What can we gain in these relationships, right? When we say we are grieving, we're often just grieving expectations. Is my child no longer going to have grandkids for me? Is my child not going to get married? I don't want my kid to have a bad life. Maybe we're not going to have a close enough relationship, right? My mom thought that because I wasn't her daughter anymore, we weren't going to be close. But seeing the ways that she showed up for me, we had a little bit of a trial by fire by me coming out, made us infinitely closer. Now that I have seen her prove that her love is unconditional, what we have gained is so much greater than what we have lost. Now, I also want to switch gears and talk a little bit about my faith journey. This is a house of worship, and I think it's important to talk about what faith has meant to me throughout my life. There are a lot of people who assume that faith and LGBTQ exist on opposite ends of a spectrum, that they are warring forces, and I'm seeing a lot of no head shakes here. That's something I've realized as well, and in fact, when I came out, the support I received from my rabbi, I was born and raised Jewish, was what made me become even more religious, seeing the support that my congregation put behind me. The biggest challenge I had in my synagogue was coming out to my Hebrew school class. I came out to my class, it was a confirmation class. There were about 14 of us, and I said, hey everybody, I'm trans, I'm coming out, I use he, him pronouns, and I just want to let you know I'm going to be going by the name Ben, and I'd really appreciate if you'd use my name. And the class immediately was like outbursts. Are you kidding me? What are you doing? Now I know what you might be thinking, that this is going to be some terrible story, but in fact they said, Ben, there are already 5 Bens in this Hebrew school class. You couldn't have picked a different name. Come on, man. Why are you so basic? That was the biggest problem I faced in my Hebrew school, was that I had to be full name Benjamin Vance Greene. All the other iterations were taken. Ben Greenberg, taken. Ben, taken. Benji, taken. Benjamin, taken. I had to get full named, first, middle, last, in order to differentiate from the other Bens. But they were with me, like that. Without me needing to step up and write policy, my synagogue immediately added on a gender-neutral bathroom to the synagogue, immediately did training for their faculty, started celebrating Pride Month, and said, how can we show up? What can we do for you? And time again, I have found people finding something in their faith, whatever their faith may be, to say, I need to make a difference. I need to build a better world for LGBTQ people. We've got this fun little thing coded into our brains called confirmation bias. The way confirmation bias works is it essentially says you can find evidence of whatever you choose to look for. You can find evidence that your best friend is in love with you. You can find evidence that your best friend hates your guts and is plotting your demise. You can find evidence of anything once you choose to look for that. And I think that faith is a perfect example of that confirmation bias in action. Some people are looking to be angry, looking to be hateful. They look to their faith to find a sword, and they can find it. I'm not here to quote passages back and forth. I can find passages in every religious text that say don't be transgender, don't be gay, don't dress that way, don't be different. I could find a passage. If I want to find a sword, I can look to my religion to find a sword. But for every one person who picks up a sword, I find 10 people who want to find a reason to be loving, want to find a reason to be strong and protecting of their LGBTQ loved ones. They look to their faith to find a shield. I could find you lines in every religious text that says, be loving, accept people as they are, celebrate human difference. You can look to your religion to find a shield. Most likely, I think the people in this room have already decided to pick up the shield. have said, I am not here in spite of my faith or my God. I am here because of my faith and my God. And living in Missouri, finding the number of people who have said, my God demands of me to build a better world for you. When I go up to the Capitol, the number of callers and nuns and priests and rabbis and people who say, I am here because my God demands this of me, it has drastically changed my view on who has my back. There are so many more people who are choosing to pick up the shield, even if they might be a little quieter about it. Maybe they are not quite as vocal as people who have huge followings on Twitter. They're here in tremendous, tremendous numbers. Now, it's not just allyship that's helped me find strength in my faith. It's also my own personal journey. There's a quote that I really, really resonate with that says, God made me transgender for the same reason he made grapes instead of wine and wheat instead of bread, so that humanity can share in the divine magic of creation. Getting to co-create myself hand in hand with my Creator every single day is the most spiritual thing I ever could have undergone. I feel so connected to my God because we have worked together to create the man I want to become. I feel so fortunate to have been on this journey. I am so proud of the man I have chosen to build hand in hand with my God. So different people will have different journeys with their faith, but I really wanted to share that piece of my journey with you all. I know we are just about over a half an hour, so I'm going to share one more personal story, and then I'm going to open the floor to any questions you have, because there's a lot of things I could talk about, but I want to talk about the things you're most interested in. But I want to close this formal presentation by talking a little bit about why I do this work every day and how I manage to stay hopeful and why I choose to be so open and honest and vulnerable. When I was coming out, there were not transgender people around me. Not in my community, not in the TV shows I was watching or the books I was reading, and there were certainly not transgender adults, and absolutely not happy ones. It did not occur to me that I would grow up because I had literally never seen it before. Never. I assumed that maybe I would go to college and then I would just disappear. It did not occur to me I would live past about 20 years old. My friends would talk about their future and their houses and their careers, and I would respectfully support them. I'd get enthusiastic, but I knew that those conversations were never meant for me. And then, the summer after my freshman year of college, I went to see an off-Broadway play with my dad that featured a trans actor playing a trans character as a romantic lead with a happy ending. He had a little bit of gray hair and a really cool beard, and my mind was blown. I had never seen anything like it before, and I spent the whole show sitting in my seat, gripping my playbill, planning out everything I was going to say to him. I was going to say, Ian, I've never seen someone like myself represented on a stage before. This gives me so much hope for myself and for my future as a transgender man. Thank you. And we were going to take a picture. He'd sign my playbill. It was going to be great. I had it all planned out. We came into this lobby room after. I'm on one side, he's on the other. I take one look at him, I open my mouth, I'm ready to give my spiel, and I burst into tears. Could not get a word out. He sees me from across the room. He walks through the whole crowd. He starts crying, and he just pulls me in. And we stand there, crying in each other's arms, not saying a word, but understanding everything we needed to know about each other. And after 2 or 3 minutes, he stepped back and he said, "This is it. This is why representation matters." And he told me the story of how he had the exact same thing happen to him 20 years before, the first time he saw a transgender person on stage, and the difference that that made for him. And in that moment, I said, okay, that's it for me. Everything I'm going to do from this moment onwards is to the goal of being that for as many people as possible. Being the reason somebody gets to look at me and say, oh, I can be trans and grow up and find love and find success and be happy. Maybe my kid is going to be okay. And everything I do, every moment I spend is to the goal of building a world where that is true for as many people as possible. Now, I've learned pretty quickly I'm not going to be able to build that world on my own. And I had a moment where I really realized that about a year ago when I was giving a presentation for a high school in small town Massachusetts. I told that story to an auditorium of 1,000 kids, and then the bell rang to send the kids off to their buses and dismiss them at the end of the day. So they clapped, and I walked down off the stage to start packing up my bag and getting ready to leave. And when I turned around to leave, there was a line of 40 kids waiting for a hug. My first thought was, how lucky am I? I've done it. I get to be this for all those kids. My second thought was much more humbling. I didn't do that. I didn't build that moment. Sure, I got to be a part of it. I got to witness this. But the fact that those kids had the knowledge to understand why they identified with the things I was saying, the fact that those kids had the safety to ask for that hug in front of all their peers and their teachers, knowing what it would mean to them, that wasn't built by me in that 60-minute presentation. That moment was built by their parents, their grandparents, their teachers, their family members, their doctors, their aunts and uncles, the person with a pride flag hanging up across the street. That moment was built by all the people in their community putting their arms around them and saying, I want to see you grow up. I want to see you thriving and successful and above all else, joyful, and I'm going to build that world. I know when we look at the news and social media, it feels like everyone is angry, like everyone has planted their stake in the ground and picked a side, and it is a side of cruelty. But I gotta tell you, I travel a lot. I go all over this country, and I am constantly braced for hate. I gotta keep myself safe. I am aware, but everywhere I go, I don't find hate. I find curiosity, openness, confusion, fear, shame, love, advocacy, and support, whether it is grandparents groups in California, a church basement in Georgia where we hold an event in secret because there are too many active militia groups, to a library that sold out the entire space in rural Iowa, to a webinar in Russia where the parents all joined under pseudonyms so they wouldn't get caught supporting their trans kids, but were willing to take that risk to learn how to be supportive. Everywhere I go, I find people who want to build a better world for the LGBTQ plus people they love. A better world is out there. That is a guarantee. The march of progress is steadily forward. I know we're going to get there. We are not going to get there by default. We are not going to get there by accident or by waiting and saying somebody else is going to step in and save us, but we most certainly are going to get there on purpose. And what I see when I come to spaces like this and see full rooms of parents and grandparents and family members and queer folks and people who say, I don't have any relation, but I care, or I'm curious, I'm ready to learn, I have a question. What I see here is purpose. You all give me hope. This is what keeps me going, that I get to come to full rooms of people who care about building that world just as much as I do. So I want to thank you all for giving me yet another reason to be hopeful. This has been an absolute delight. At this point, we will switch over to questions. I've got my wonderful mic runner here. Help him get his steps in. If anybody really far away has questions, and then maybe somewhere up here, we'll get him a good workout in. And again, you can ask me anything. You can ask me about my medical transition. You can ask me about politics. You can ask me about optimism or misinformation or athletics. There is nothing you cannot ask me. This is not a trap. Whatever you are curious about, I am happy to talk about. So I will open the floor. What questions do you have? Who's going to be our brave first question asker? I love it. Oh, no, I think in the back. The woman standing. Right in front of you.
I am. See you. Hi, I'm Faith.
Hi.
So I work in healthcare, specifically psychiatry with kids. I've had several trans kids over the years, and of course you know it's Missouri. So currently in Missouri, our transgender clinic is gone, dismantled. So now I don't know where I can send anyone.
It's a good question. I wish there was an easy answer, and that is an answer that is going to be constantly evolving. There also has been an executive order that is pushing towards a federal ban. We're not going to get really deep into that unless you want me to do that. But the short version is, an executive order is not a law. An executive order can only do certain things to overcome state law or what is covered in the Constitution. I don't know exactly what's going to happen with that. I know there will be legal challenges and are legal challenges. Right now, what I'll say in terms of specific resources for people who are trying to access care, there is an organization called the Trans Youth Emergency Project. They work with an organization called Elevated Access, which is a volunteer pilots organization that will, off the record, fly people wherever they need to access certain kinds of health care. They will donate their time, their fuel, their planes, etc. And again, that is called a Trans Youth Emergency Project. No marketing, very bare bones website. They are an outstanding organization doing everything they can to help people access care in a way that is safe, in a way that is legal. This is not an illegally operating organization. They are an outstanding community. Trans Youth Emergency Project. They are created by the Campaign for Southern Equality. If anyone has ever heard Y'all Means All, that's Campaign for Southern Equality. They are a very cool group of people. It's a good question. I'm glad you asked. We've got, oh, okay, I love it. The floodgates have opened. Bring it on. We'll go to this side, and then we'll go to you in the picture.
Thank you, Ben, for being here. Two things. I'm interested if you wanted to share a little more about what it was like for you to access health care as a trans adolescent. And also, you referenced towards the end of your talk about you do have to do things to stay safe. And I'm just wondering if you could expand how you stay safe in 2025.
Yeah, absolutely. So accessing healthcare has been, it's interesting, it's fun. Don't we love getting healthcare in America? It's very relaxing, very casual, easy to afford. No, it's rough. It was rough. I did not receive gender-affirming care as an adolescent, mostly because my parents were not interested in that. It was not because I was not interested. So I had two very distinct healthcare journeys. I had my journey around top surgery, and I had my journey around hormone therapy. So hormone therapy, for a long time, I had no interest. I said, no, I'm good, and we'll come back to why I said that in a couple of minutes. With top surgery, I knew that I was miserable with the way that my body was showing up, right? I had a fairly substantial chest, which meant I would not wear a t-shirt, so I would not go swimming, I would not go to the beach, I would not do anything, any activity you had to do in a t-shirt. I was not exercising, I would not dance, I would not move around, I would take a shower with the lights off and a shirt on, and most critically, I wouldn't hug people. For years, I did not hug the people I loved most. And if you couldn't tell by now, I'm like a teddy bear. I love to hug people. I'm a big hugger. You all can hug me whenever you want to. And it broke my heart, but I knew that I would be miserable feeling the shape of my body against someone else's body. So I would give a quick side hug, knowing that I wanted to hug someone so badly. So I was miserable. And to put it bluntly, I was missing out on my life. I was not participating in my life because of how uncomfortable I was, and that's called gender dysphoria. I had a lot of dysphoria. I was miserable. So I was constantly telling my parents, I want to have top surgery, I want to have top surgery. I would spend hours just looking at top surgery results on my phone and crying and wishing that could be me and wondering if it would ever be me. And my parents were really nervous because, right, it's 2015. They did the best they could with the resources that were available to them at the time, which were bad resources. Pretty much the couple of people they talked to said, don't worry, it's a phase, just be nice to your kid, be safe, and it'll all blow over, don't let it do anything permanent. So it was really hard for me to access that, even though I really wanted it. And eventually they decided, okay, he can have top surgery if he is willing to see a gender exploratory therapist. For anyone who hasn't heard of gender exploratory therapy, it is now recognized as a more subtle form of conversion therapy. They were not trying anything malicious. They were not trying to hurt me or make me not transgender. A gender exploratory therapist, essentially their goal is to make sure there's not any other cause of your gender identity. But I knew that they had hired Bob, a kindly older man, to make sure that I was really trans before I had my surgery, which meant that I was not going to share a single doubt that I had with Bob because I was suffering, and I needed that suffering to end. So I would say whatever it took to get him to see me. And I asked him for real support. There was a moment where I said, Bob, I am feeling actively suicidal. I am really struggling. I think I want to break up with my girlfriend. She's really rude to me. I'm really unhappy. I'm working this job. It's terrible. And he said, wow, do you think you would be less upset if you were experiencing these things as a woman? And I was like, man, I need help right now. Robert, please. And he had his singular focus. So rather than talking about any real doubts I might have had about my identity or about this surgery, I was there to prove myself week after week, and eventually he said, okay, fine. I support you. You can get top surgery. You are really trans. Seal of approval. Congratulations. And so then my parents agreed to help me find a consultation. At that time, there were maybe 6 top surgeons in the country who were actively doing that surgery well. And so the wait list to meet with the surgeon was about 2.5 years long. Finally met with the surgeon. She said, okay, we can schedule your surgery in about 9 months from now. So we scheduled the surgery, and I had that in 2019. The way that surgery gave me life, the ways that I constantly forget my body has not always been this way, has been outstanding. So that was part one. It was quite expensive. It was a battle to get insurance to cover it. But that was my experience with my medical transition surgical-wise. Hormone-wise was a really interesting story. For a while I said, I don't really want hormones, I'm not interested in that. I was at an OBGYN appointment. I have PCOS, polycystic ovary syndrome, so I had all sorts of, my hormones had always been kind of out of whack, and she said, okay, we need to put you on a high-dose estrogen birth control. And I said, I'm a little uncomfortable with the idea of a lot of estrogen. Should I ask about hormones? And she said, no, you don't want to do that. That's terrible. And so that was the end of that conversation. And I internalized that. I said, okay, so it's terrible. And the ways that we talk about testosterone as a society are very like it is the great corrupter of humanity, right? We use phrases like a testosterone-fueled rage and describe men that just totally cannot control themselves because of how pumped up they are on testosterone. So to be very blunt with you all, I would tell people, even though I would love a beard, I would love a deeper voice, I don't want to go on testosterone because I don't want to be a bad person. That was my legitimate fear based on the ways all the people around me were talking about testosterone. And indeed, most of the boys in my school and the men I was seeing on the news were incredibly cruel to me. So I was afraid that going on testosterone would make me cruel. A few years after I had top surgery in 2021, I was talking to an endocrinologist about an unrelated issue, and she was like, yeah, your hormone imbalance is very, very dangerous. You need to be on hormones right now. It can be estrogen, it can be testosterone, you have to pick one. Which felt very much like a kick in the pants from God of me saying, like, I don't know if that's the right choice, and my doctor being like, nope, you gotta go. And I said, okay, fine, I'd like to go on testosterone. And she said, okay, let's talk about what that means. People talk about hormone therapy as something that's handed out like candy. And even as an adult, I had to go through processes to make sure that I was the right candidate for that. I got my hormones through WashU, a renowned center for transgender healthcare, nationwide, well known for their quality and standards of care. And I had so many questions. She had a meeting with my parents to answer their questions. She sat me down and said, okay, what do you think this is going to do? And I gave her my whole list, and she said, all right, here's what you're right about, here's what you're wrong about, and here's what other things are going to help supplement, right? Your muscles aren't going to become huge. You do still have to go to the gym. And I was like, bummer. So I got all this information. Finally, I started testosterone, and I have now spent the last 4 years at the testosterone level of a cisgender man. And I am shocked to discover and report that, as it turns out, some men just choose to be like that. It's not the testosterone, it's the society. What? Shocker, I know. I did not become a worse person. I did not become angrier or meaner or more aggressive. I became aggressively nice. The volume was turned up on what was already there. Many of my emotions did come across in ways that were new or perhaps more intense, but I did not become a cruel or bad or hostile person. My friends would say, I'm feeling sick, and I would say, I'm going to break down your door with chicken soup. Let me clean. I was aggressively nice. So I went on testosterone not because I was miserable without it. I didn't have dysphoria about my voice or about my facial hair, but I came to understand that I could be even more joyful with it. And the best way I can describe how I feel is that for the first time, I have come home to my body. Now, that hasn't always been easy, right? Going through puberty as a 23-year-old was terrible. I hated that. Nobody else was having voice cracks at the board meetings, but I survived. I was very brave. I was also very sweaty and had so much acne for so long. Now, there were also plenty of moments where my insurance will just randomly say, you are no longer approved for this medication, and I'll have to pay for it out of pocket or go without, or shortages, or real moments where I wonder, am I still going to have access to this care that has given me a life and a body that I have been able to finally build a home in? There's a lot of fear there, but the care that I have accessed is so magnificent to me. I'm so lucky I had it, and I wish that someone had sat me down earlier and told me what my options were, because I transitioned late enough in my life, in my 20s, that my transition medically was reparative. I was undoing the changes I had already gone through. I was undoing the development of my breasts, but things like growing hips and a figure, I can't undo that. My shoe size was already set, so I have to special order my shoes. I get mostly kids' shoes. Now, don't worry, don't feel too bad for me. Kids' shoes are way cheaper and have way more light-up options, so I'm good. But there are lots of changes that I missed out on, right? I will be shorter than some of my cisgender male peers, and my beard is further in development, further behind some other guys. So I'm going through these changes late. If I had started younger, I could have gone through the right puberty the first time and not had to spend as much pain or time undoing the things I didn't want to happen to my body. And I really like to highlight that when we talk about youth medical care. People say, why can't people just wait until they're 18? Our options are not a neutral option and going through an altered puberty. Our options are active choices, a puberty they don't want to go through and a puberty they do want to go through. Do we want to make them spend time repairing themselves, or do we want to let them build a body that they might want changes to later? Sure, but they also statistically are unlikely to regret the choices they make at a younger age. So I really wish I had had access to those pieces of care earlier in my life, because I wouldn't have had as much to undo about my body. I know that was maybe a longer answer than you were expecting, but I love talking about my experience of healthcare. Thank you for asking. In the pink shirt here, we had one. Yeah.
Hi, I'm Jill. Oh, okay. Thank you. I love everything that you're telling us. I wish everybody could just accept people and the way that they are. But I know I've got, I'm in my 70s now. I was a school counselor.
Yeah.
And I retired in 2013, kind of a little bit younger. And I hadn't really had any experience with transgender children. The last 3 years, we did have one transgender child. And the situation, and this is, I think this is, this is kind of a fear, this always comes up in the news, is about the bathroom situation. And I don't mean any disrespect or anything, but when you said that the synagogue got you created a
gender neutral bathroom.
When you travel around the country, do you find that a lot of, I guess you speak before schools too, do you find that the schools are doing anything about this to not only help the child, but to help, fears of the parents or the, that would help everybody? Are they just ignoring the situation?
Yeah, it is an excellent question. So our usual worst case scenario is that schools say, no problem, you're transgender, you want to use a bathroom, great, we've got a bathroom in the nurse's office. If she's not there, hold it. That was, for me, for a while, my solution in high school was that I would go to the nurse's office. It's a big building, there's only one nurse's office, and most schools do not have a full-time nurse, so it mostly meant not drinking a lot of water and just holding it, avoiding eating to make sure I did not have to use a restroom during a day. And that is relatively common among a lot of trans kids. I also want to bust a really quick myth. There was a study done at the Williams Institute at UCLA that looked at every place that had affirming bathroom legislation, policies in schools, in towns, in congregations, in workplaces. They found a 0% correlation with inclusive bathroom policy and increased reports of bathroom-related assaults. In short, nothing bad happens when you let a transgender person use a bathroom. So there are a lot of fears people have. This is largely stoked by the media. So what I really like to highlight, whenever we talk about these hot button issues with sports or locker rooms or bathrooms, and we get so worried about protecting the kids, I like to highlight that a lot of our discussions are like dangling a set of shiny keys in the face of the American public and being like, look, scary, ooh, everybody watch out here, it's about protecting the kids, it's about protecting women. Tell me how it's about protecting women when Lauren Boebert and Nancy Mace chase a random cisgender woman into the bathroom, calling slurs at her and yelling, you don't belong in here, and calling Capitol Police. And when she says, I'm not Sarah McBride, they say, oh, sorry about that. Sorry we gathered a crowd to chase you to the bathroom. Our bad. That really happened 2 days ago, by the way. Does that seem like protecting women? Women, in fact, cisgender women are the only people so far who have been targeted about under places with transgender bathroom bans or schools that have transgender bathroom rules. It is usually just women who are lesbian, women who have short hair, women who are black, who are in any way gender non-conforming. You don't look like you're supposed to be in here, right? When we anoint ourselves the bathroom police to bravely stand up for our children, we make everybody a little less safe. So when parents are really worried about what's going to happen to their kid in the bathroom, I'm more worried about how their kid is going to be treating others, or what messages their kid is learning about what is and isn't acceptable way for them to exist in the world. So a lot of schools are very nervous because there are a lot of highly radicalized parents who are showing up and saying, you need to protect my child, you need to not allow this transgender student into the bathroom. And I want to be clear, places like schools and workplaces and the world, we have laws about what behavior is and is not appropriate in a bathroom, right? Schools have general rules about what behavior people can do in a bathroom. Being transgender is not an excuse someone is going to use to break those rules. If someone is going to break a rule about what you can and can't do in a bathroom, they're not going to waste 6 months going on hormone replacement therapy so that they can do something creepy in a bathroom. They're probably just going to do something creepy in a bathroom. They don't need to grow breasts to do it. So I really like to bust a lot of myths around there. There is a lot of fear, and I'm not suggesting that you are a highly radicalized person at all. There's a lot of fear, and so I really like to break down the idea of like, does that fear make sense, actually? Is that coming to fruition at all? Or is it making all of us less safe? So some schools will have gender-neutral bathrooms. Some schools will say, you can use the bathroom that aligns with your identity and let us know if there is a problem, right? That's kind of gold standard, is building a culture where they say, we want to make sure your peers are supportive of you. So if people give you an issue, let us know. I know when I was coming out, there were a lot of transgender bathroom bans being talked about, especially North Carolina. So as a public pushback, there was the I'll pee with you campaign. It was buttons that people would wear that said, I'll pee with you. And that was awesome, because at the time, I looked like an 11-year-old boy. I looked like an 11-year-old boy for about 8 years, none of which included me being 11. I looked like a little child, and I felt very uncomfortable going into men's restrooms because people would say things to me about how I wasn't supposed to be there, or how I was a freak, and it was not fun to go into public bathrooms. In certain places, when I would travel to visit family in North Carolina, I was extra worried, and if I saw somebody with one of those pins, I might tap them on the shoulder. I had a couple of times where I found a stranger. Guys did not really participate in the campaign. Women were all over it, which I loved, but most guys were not willing to show up as allies in a visual way. But I might say, hey, I'm feeling really unsafe here. Would you mind just coming and washing your hands while I'm in there so somebody doesn't physically harm me? So being able to identify my allies like that was really meaningful. So there's a lot of fears around bathrooms, but my fears are for transgender people and for all of us, the ways we are impacted by people becoming the bathroom police. Yeah, thank you.
Hi.
I'll get to you next. Hi.
My question is around your interaction with our Missouri legislators. I don't know if any of you recall, but our present governor, when he was running for office, had a commercial that aired many times. And I forget the exact wording on it, but it showed that he was absolutely did not understand transgender gender, because what should have been speaking of a transgender male, was actually a transgender female. So my question is, and ever since then, it's like these people who are just insistent on making sure that we're keeping our children and our women safe, really need to be educated. Do you have any opportunities to do that? I'm sure you've testified, but do you actually have conversations with legislators? And if so, are they open to you, or do they say, I don't want to talk to you?
Yeah, that is a fantastic question. It's so fun going to the state capitol. It's very lovely. We all hold hands. We skip in between punching each other in the face. It's terrible. I hate it there. Yeah, there is a lot of fear. There is a lot of anger. And there's a lot of confusion. People are afraid of what they don't know. A fun statistic I learned recently from reading Representative Sarah McBride's book. In this country, more people believe they have met a ghost than say they have met a transgender person. That perfectly highlights what the problem here is. That statistic is the funniest thing ever to me. So, boo, now you got both. I find that humanizing myself is something that I'm regularly doing in those spaces of just saying, like, hey, look, I'm just a guy. Now, it's critical to realize that so many of these elected officials who are talking so much about this don't get it and could not care less. They are not particularly passionate about hating transgender people. We're the political football that they can kick for as many points as possible. We are the scapegoat that they can point at and say, hey, I know we closed your school so we could open a religious charter school. I know your roads are falling apart and you have no clean water for the last 4 months. I know we're working on that, but oh my God. The transgenders. Watch out, everyone. We'll handle it. Careful. Right? When I went to testify about the transgender sports bill, one of the things I pointed out was there were 8 different transgender sports bills and 5 transgender athletes in the whole state. It's a waste of time. It is a solution in search of a problem. I really want us to remember that as we debate these things, we do not agree on a problem and disagree on the solution. I disagree that there is a problem. They are trying to create a problem to use as a distraction for what the real problems of their constituents are. So now to your general question, or your more specific question of, can we get through to these legislators? Some people are really far down a pipeline, are very committed to, this is what the people want from me, this is what will be my political power, and I will ride this horse until it dies underneath me. So some people are in it. Others are really in it publicly, and then privately we'll talk to people like the folks at Promo and say, hey, that thing somebody testified about the impact this bill would have on their family, is that true? Is that really what this is going to do? They told me it was about protecting kids, but there's genital examinations in this bill? Is that real? Is that really going to make this family have to leave? So there are our stories that we tell that do make an impact, even if in the moment they're on their phones, they're walking around the room, they're talking to each other, they're getting up and leaving during our testimony, some of them who are more extreme in their beliefs. Now, over 50% of our current sitting Congress in Missouri is new. We have a lot of people to get to know, so I don't know exactly. From the folks at Promo, what I've learned, there is a tremendous amount of optimism in the number of people who might be reachable as opposed to previous years. I don't know for sure. I don't know exactly what's going to happen, but I know I'm going to continue trying. And I know, by the way, to put in a little plug, they're going to hear it a whole lot better from you than they are from me. They know I'm going to come in and say, please don't hurt transgender people. I'm transgender and you're hurting me. For some of them, they are steeled against that because I am the person they expect. I am the messenger they are waiting for. They've already been told, here's what he's going to say. Don't even worry about it. I am easy to brush off because I have a bias. Of course I'm going to say, please don't ban my health care. I want my health care. I'm, whatever their beliefs are about who I am. But when somebody who they feel looks like them, when somebody who comes in who is not transgender, not a member of the LGBTQ community, is a lifelong Missouri resident, is a farmer just like them, or is a person of faith just like them, maybe they even go to the same church, says, well, they probably do not come to this church, but maybe they follow similar kinds of religions, comes in and says, hey, I'm feeling really troubled that this is what you're focusing on. You're my representative, and you're hurting a lot of people, and the people of Missouri are struggling. Why are you focusing on this? They are mostly only doing this because they want to kick the political football for points. When they hear from the people they care about, you all, not me, then they say, oh, guess I need to find a better football. Hopefully, they will not just pick another minority group to make their lives miserable, but they might learn, okay, this isn't getting me the points I thought it was getting me. The more they hear from people, whether it is in person or emails or letters or whatever role you want to take, that does mean a whole lot to them. They do keep track of, like when there's a bill in the House, they look at the straight numbers of how many people submitted written online testimony opposed and in support. They take those numbers very seriously. They want to know that they are doing something that will make them popular. So make them unpopular. I think there's room for education, and when there's not room for education, there is room to start figuring out how we get somebody else. Yeah. We've got another question. Yeah. 2 more. You got it. We've got one in the pink sweater in the back. Oh, I noticed that it is after 7:30. Oops. I told you once I get started, I just keep going. Yeah.
Hi, I'm Sarah.
Hi.
Thank you so much for your presentation. I taught both public and private middle school education, and now I'm a full-time mom of 3 boys, soon to be 4. And just looking back at my experience, I mean, a good portion of the time I taught was kind of when a lot of this talk of LGBTQ became more accepted. I remember vividly 2015, 2016, it kind of peaked, at least in the schools where I was teaching, and certainly in the middle high school environment where I was teaching and coaching. And I found that, surprisingly, it was actually like much more accepted amongst the teachers to become more inclusive and embrace this, mentality of just be more open. But then it was the everyday application of it that became it became clear just that there was kind of a divide between, well, yeah, we accept everybody here and we want to be inclusive and we are quote unquote woke, but then the idea that like a student would go to the counselor to talk about, I think I'm having these feelings or whatnot, that's when you kind of started hearing more of like the murmurs of like, well, this is just kind of this woke mentality. It's kind of a fashion right now. And I guess my biggest question for you, both as a teacher, as a mom, just raising our children, like how do we battle that mentality of like, well, this is just a new thing, it'll pass, the more you expose kids to it, the more they might get confused. I mean, you hear that all the time on the news with curriculum, with just endless conversations being had about, inclusivity in literature and movies. So what kinds of things do you tell people when they say, well, this is just this new thing, this woke mentality is a fashion or whatever that's just kind of cool, and so we kind of have to watch it when kids come to us, and how do we take them serious, that kind of thing.
Yeah.
Is this making sense?
Yes, absolutely.
Okay.
Yeah.
Well,
Thank you for asking. It's a great question. I will do my best to give a short answer, and we'll make this the last question because I definitely can give a solid answer to this. somewhat short, and you'll hold me to that answer to that question. First thing I do when somebody asks me questions like that, especially if we're one-on-one, is I ask them for more information, because there are a lot of reasons people will ask me about whether or not it's a trend. Maybe it's because they've heard a lot of things on social media and they are radicalized and angry and they're looking to pick a fight. Maybe their kid has recently come out and they are very afraid. A lot of times it's that one. If they admit that I am transgender, then they admit their child is transgender. And that is very scary and not something people want to do. Maybe they're just genuinely curious, right? Misinformation is a multi-billion-dollar industry. There are people whose entire job it is to make things that look real. Misinformation does not only work on bad people, does not only work on stupid people. Misinformation comes to all of us. And misinformation around transgender identities is incredibly, incredibly popular right now. It's very hard to know what are the sources of data to trust, what studies are legitimate. There's a lot of junk science out there, and people love to say it's a phase. So when somebody says to me, "Are you worried it's a phase?" I say, "Tell me more about that. Are you worried it's a phase? Tell me what you're hearing about this. What do you know so far?" Because I can throw all my different spiels at the wall like spaghetti until something sticks, but that usually just leaves me feeling a lot more tired. So in general, when someone asks whether that question or something about sports or bathrooms or something that there are a lot of reasons they could be, I will sit down and say, "Okay, tell me more about that. Help me understand where you're at with this." Now, when it comes specific to this idea of it being a phase or it being something that goes away quickly or it being a trend that's happening right now, yes, it's more visible for the first time, but transgender identities have existed throughout history. And showing our kids, our loved ones, examples of transgender and LGBTQ people throughout history is so critical to helping us understand that even if it wasn't taught in our schools, even if it wasn't something that we were meeting people who were transgender, doesn't mean that that community did not exist. There are so many forces that kept us stuck in the closet, that prevented us from having the words to describe how we were feeling or the safety to live a particularly long and thorough life. But there are so many historical figures who we might now use words like transgender or non-binary. Who here has ever read the book Little Women? Yeah, I love Little Women. Most of us have heard of the prolific author Louisa May Alcott. Most of us have not heard that Louisa May Alcott went by the name Lou Alcott and he, him pronouns with all the people in his personal life, regularly wrote letters to the people that he loved, to the one woman roommate and best friend that he lived with for most of his life, about how he was experiencing pain in his body and really wished every single day he could wake up as a man, and was so uncomfortable with the way that his body looked, describing what we might now call gender dysphoria. I'm not going to put the word transgender on Lou Alcott. I don't know his story, and it's not right for me to just say Lou Alcott was transgender just like me. But to know that people have felt similar ways as how I have felt would have meant so much to me as a trans kid, feeling like I was the very first person to be broken or different in this way. To know that we had existed throughout all of both modern and ancient history. There have always been LGBTQ and transgender people. We've just been forced to hide so often. Or even during times we weren't forced to hide. When we were then forced to hide, they said, "Stop talking about that. Don't tell those stories." The most popular pictures from the photos of Nazi book burnings, the picture everybody has seen when we talk about Nazi book burnings, is the burning of the Institute for Sexual Medicine, run by Magnus Hirschfeld, which was the largest LGBTQ plus health center in Germany. They did a tremendous amount of gender-affirming care, hormone therapy, puberty blockers, gender reassignment surgery, and they did tremendous amounts of research and follow-up and history and storytelling, and all of that was lost. It was burned, because they did not want our stories, our history, to be told. But this community has always existed, and we have always survived. So recognizing that there is so much history, even if it has been intentionally shielded from us in our schools because we don't want to confuse the kids, I've come out to a lot of people in my life. It is the easiest every time for kids. Kids are not nearly as confused as adults. It is much more frightening and confusing for adults than it is for kids. And again, hearing the word transgender for a kid like it would have for me, wouldn't have made me transgender. It would have helped me understand what's possible and given me the ability to talk about my experiences and my challenges. There's also a tremendous amount of data about the very, very minimal rates of detransition. Around 1% of transgender people will at some point say, I am not identifying as transgender right now. Of that 1%, only about 10% say the reason was because I'm not actually transgender. Most of the reasons are, I couldn't afford it. I couldn't bear the loss of my family. I wasn't safe. I wasn't supported. I wasn't happy because of the way people were treating me. Tiny, tiny proportion of transgender people will say, my bad, I was wrong, I was not supposed to do that. I have friends who have detransitioned, and even they do not advocate against transgender people receiving health care. They said, I'm just on my journey. I'm not going back or undoing. I am continuing to move forward as a more informed, developed version of myself, having been on this journey. So there are so many ways that shows up, but that conversation around detransition, usually it's because people have a lot of fear or have been exposed to a lot of misinformation. So I might talk about the history, I might talk about what are the worries you might be having about a conversation you potentially have had with a family member recently. I figure out where they're stuck so I can get them where I want them to go. It's a good question. I hope that answered it. I know I took a lot of approaches. At this point, we are going to close out the session. A couple of closing words from me. First, thank you all for being here. Thank you to everyone who helped put this together, in particular, Dave and Barb. I am so sorry you are sick and can't be here with us. Dave, you put so much love into this event. I'm staring down the barrel of the camera here. Thank you. Thank you to everyone for having me, for being here, for the fact that you host these conversations in your sanctuary. This feels sacred to spend this time together talking about this at this moment of time in the world. Together is the best thing we can be right now. My last little piece of housekeeping is that I will be outside selling copies of my book. If you would like one, a signed copy. Even if you don't want a book, I have a little thing I do as a way to remind myself just how not alone I am in this fight. Usually it's a thing that authors like to sign books for other people. I like to have other people sign books for me. If you would sign my copy of my book before you hit the road, it can be just your name and the date. It can be something about the event tonight. I have multiple people who've drawn pictures of squirrels. They don't know each other, but I think they should become friends. You can write anything you want in here, right on any page. On my lowest moments, on my scariest days, I sit and I go through this book and I just look at the number of people who have shared with me that they want to build a better world too. So again, thank you all for being here. I'm going to run through the middle so that I can get to the table and sell books before the waves come into the middle. So let me run out. And again, just thank you all from the bottom of my heart. We are going to get to a better world. It's not going to be easy. We are going to get there on purpose if we do so together. Thank you all so, so much. Okay, I'm going to run away now. Thanks, everybody. Oh, that's loud.